So once again, do your name and ID for me so I have that on tape. I know we're rolling, but go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Jonathan Taylor. I am the founder and director of A Voice for Male Students.
Okay. And can you give me just a little bit of background? How did you come into this whole thing, and did you have personal experience? What started you off?
Well, I was an instructor at Texas A&M University at one of their satellite campuses, and I was being introduced to the conversation on gender equity in education, and I began to research more of the issues regarding gender equity in education. And as I did so, I noticed that there was kind of a void in the conversation regarding men and boys' educational experiences. So there just wasn't enough advocacy, and certain advocates tended to be kind of looked down upon or marginalized or ignored or even worse, simply for bringing up men's and boys' education issues. So for that reason, that just kind of piqued my intrigue, so I began researching it in even more earnest, and I just accumulated more and more research and so eventually I thought that, I have to make a lot of this research and this data available to the public. And so that's sort of what spearheaded sort of the vision for what I have going on right now. That's a very simple kind of introduction.
Okay.
That's the basics.
What were you teaching before? Were you teaching or?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was an instructor of freshman and remedial composition and argumentation. Also a tutor of at-risk students, and so.
At the college level, or?
Yes.
Okay, and so that's interesting that you didn't come to this by witnessing some great injustice or something. It was really just through.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. I mean, I did not experience any kind of, injustice, directly myself. Nothing that could be called some kind of traumatic experience. Really, I just noticed that there was an issue, a problem in the conversation, and the conversation seemed very imbalanced, and just there are certain ethical issues that crop up, and I thought that this was an issue. Well, there are many issues under educational equity, but I just thought that men's and boys' experiences needed to be called to greater attention. So.
And it wasn't even like you don't have legal training. I'm just trying to kind of set the context. It's not that you saw a due process violation necessarily. It just felt wrong to you in a very layman.
The feeling isn't, the foundation for it, but I mean, at the beginning, I knew, back in 2010, 2011, I didn't know that much about the issues, and so. It just kind of snowballed over time, and I began interviewing people who were very close to the fire, so to speak, like Title IX coordinators, including the Title IX coordinator at my own school. And because of that, I gradually learned more and more from asking, talking to people who were, in the trenches working on this sort of thing. And from that, I began developing more and more knowledge. I compiled what you've likely already seen, the a database of lawsuits on my website. From that, I have built up relationships with various attorneys, and their insight has been very helpful in me not only reaffirming what I already strongly suspected, but also formulating solutions and strategies over the long term.
So describe kind of what you saw. What was the imbalance or what was lacking?
Well, actually, to be perfectly honest, at Texas A&M University, it really wasn't that bad. I mean, the culture wasn't, at that university in particular, it was actually one of the better universities. But consider that I was, at the time that I was teaching, it was in 2009, 2010, and that was a few years after, say, the Duke University, the Duke lacrosse, hoax, essentially. And so, right around the time that it actually happened, around 2006, 2007, a lot of the information wasn't, really released to the public, but eventually, the information and the full impact of what had happened, became more understood as we started to accumulate a lot of information. I think that was a good wake-up call for a lot of people, that there was something wrong with the culture of our educational institutions. And so from there, I began looking more and more into that type of bias, And the more I looked into it, the more I found, and the more I found, the more I found that there was to find, and so it just went on from there.
And what'd you find?
Oh, okay. Yes, certainly. Well, I found people who are charged with diversity and educational equity who are just blatantly ignoring the gaps in, say, enrollment or graduation rates or general underachievement by men and boys. Also to include, the fact that men and boys are, 75% of those diagnosed with learning disabilities and disorders. That's not something that's generally brought up to the Department of Education as a gender equity in education issue. Also concerning due process violations, we're talking about, what has been very much in the media lately, men who are, accused and sometimes wrongly accused of sexual assault on college or university campuses. They're not generally afforded due process or a fair procedure, and so they tend to be suspended or expelled under very low standards and very shady procedures. So that is sort of a general gist of it. And it's really just like there's been kind of a lack of a conversation empathizing with men's and boys' educational issues, and on top of that, there's been sometimes kind of in some places I would say there has been sort of an animus against men and boys. We're talking about like universities like Duke in particular, and or sometimes kind of a begrudging that men and boys' educational issues should even be worthy of mention, and there's various statements that people in academia have said, which are very disconcerting, and which I think represents the mindset of a subculture that has sort of built up in academia over the last 20 to 30 years, and I think that needs to be called to attention.
What do you think is driving that, or what do you think is underlying that?
Well, over the last 20 to 30 years, I think perhaps one of the best ways that it has been framed. I remember I was attending a symposium by at UT Austin. It was called Project Males. It's actually an initiative for Latino males in education in Central and South and West Texas. And the head of the program there, the executive director, Dr. Victor Sines, was talking about how gender issues in education has become kind of a zero-sum game, where it seems as though to advocate for men and boys in any capacity at all is seen as taking away from women and girls. And I think that some of this does indeed come from feminism. I think that feminism had some noble goals with it, but I think that there are some flaws, some serious flaws in how it views the sort of the framework of society and the structures of power, so on and so forth. For example, feminism has been very consistent and very effective at calling attention to the fact that men are at the top of society. They are overrepresented among, say, CEOs, politicians, people in high legal positions. And so in that sense, when we're talking about the corridors of power in our institutions, men have been, are still overrepresented. But if you look at the bottom of society, if you look at, who is, which sex is overrepresented among, say, the homeless, among those who, do the most brutal, filthy, and deadly work in society, who die on the job, who commit suicide, who drop out of school, who, are jailed, who are 93% of those in prison. Those tend to be, those are overwhelmingly men and boys. So while it has historically been true, and is still true today, that men are sort of the majority sex on the top of society, looking down at the bottom of society, it's also true that men currently and historically have been the overrepresented sex at the bottom as well. And that's something that feminism has not really called attention to. So out of that, out of this framework, feminism has dominated the conversation for the last 30 years. There has been sort of an imbalance in not only the attention that we give to men and boys from a perspective of gender equity, But also there's been grown kind of a culture of begrudging them any kind of concern or empathy at all. Now I would also say that I wouldn't say that it's all feminism's fault or anything like that. I mean there's a lot of people who stand to make money off of there being problems in our society, and also historically, even before feminism, we have kind of lived in a culture where if a man you know is in pain or suffers, we tell him to be a real man or man up, and just basically suck it up and
Mhm.
and don't complain because be a traditional male and whatnot.
Mm.
So I think that all of these factors together, I wouldn't lay it at the feet of a singular
Right.
entity, but I think that all of these factors have kind of created, if not a perfect storm, then something pretty close to it, which is what we're seeing the symptoms of today.
So you came at this just to, and sorry, this is all by way of context, but you came at this. It's just so curious to me, kind of out of a, not maybe pedagogical is not the right word, but it was really from an educational perspective that, hey, wait a minute, we're neglecting or giving short shrift to our guys here because of some political wins and so on, and that's where you kind of came, and and also there's this horrible due process thing happening
Mm-hmm.
on the side that was kind of almost afterwards, after you were already kind of perked up to the.
Yeah. I got to say that that initially, my concern was, the educational attainment issues and a
Yeah.
little bit of just kind of the cultural bias issues. But really, my work in the due process field really came in later. Like in 2011, I was already volunteering for symposia in Central Texas at UT Austin, for men's and boys educational issues, particularly for men and boys of color. I was already
Got
I
it.
was already working on that, but the due
Mhm.
process did come about a year and a half after.
So like around 13 when stuff started, right?
Yeah, it's really like mid 2012
Yeah.
when the due process
Yeah.
stuff actually got
So,
rolling.
so tell me what you saw there. So, okay, so now back to our issue.
Go ahead.
Of campus sexual assault. So tell me when you started kind of focusing in on what was going on with all this campus sexual assault stuff. What did you find? What did you find alarming? What was the?
Well, I interviewed the Title IX coordinator at my own university, Michelle Vieira, and that was one of the. This was actually during the early stages, and I asked her. I asked her numerous questions, and she actually, confessed to some things which, either by luck or skill, it happened to. She happened to just mention these things. She mentioned that several students had, for one thing, recorded evidence of professors harassing students and put it up on YouTube, and the administration appealed to YouTube to take down the evidence of the professors, not once but 5 times. And so, I mean, that was one thing that I thought was very off in their conduct as administrators. I thought that if they're really wanting students to come forward and report harassment or abuse or anything like that, why are they going to YouTube and requesting that they take down that evidence? Perhaps if other students who were harassed saw those the video evidence and said, oh, hey, this happened to me too, perhaps they would be more likely to report it. Now, I don't know the nature of the harassment exactly, but I that really seemed off to me, and it kind of it helped keep my focus or my understanding that ultimately administrators are careerists. They tend to be out for their own careers first and foremost, and so we have to kind of understand that no matter what side of the issue that we're on.
Mhm.
In addition, I asked. Go ahead.
Wait, so I'm just trying to say, you thought that they should not take down the video
They should not take down the video.
so
I
that it
thought
would
that
encourage more people to come forward. And they did take down the video of the
5 times.
professor allegedly harassing.
Yeah, 5 times.
They took it down 5 times?
Well, they appealed to YouTube to take it down, and YouTube did 5 times. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So they were protecting the harasser.
That is correct. And not only that, the Title IX coordinator herself classified the harassment as outrageous. in her own words, outrageous harassment.
Huh.
So I thought that was very off, and that was very disconcerting to me. And so I mean, I actually recorded the interview and put it out on the internet for people to see. I mean, it's still available if you want to see it.
Yeah. So that kind of said what to you?
Well, I mean, that said to me at the end of the day that administrators are out to protect themselves. No matter, where they may stand on, gender issues, on racial issues. Again, I don't know what type of harassment it was. Maybe it was racial, maybe it was sexual, maybe it was some kind of religious harassment.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, the administrators are out to protect themselves. And, there's this kind of perspective that I have that, the faces of the victims may change, but oftentimes the reasons are still the same. And administrators, in a lot of ways, have kind of become a social and political class in and of themselves, set apart from teachers in many ways. There's something that has been called the administrative bloat, where at many higher ed institutions, administrators now outnumber faculty, and that's problematic, I think. And there's a whole other can of worms involved in that conversation. But that's one of the things that she admitted in that interview. There were some other things about due process that she admitted that I found very disconcerting as well, and sort of piqued my intrigue and spurred me to investigate other things further.
Okay. So that's the first thing that you saw was this weird, which doesn't fit in line. Why I'm confused, it doesn't totally fit in line with somebody kind of disregarding men's and boys kind of.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but I was talking to her in general.
Yeah. Okay. So it just got your attention.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It keeps it on my radar.
Okay.
It's a good thing for me to have. It's good for me to have that kind of balance and sort of that wide perspective.
Okay. So then it got your you focused in and.
Well, okay. So some of the other things that we were talking about were the the nature of whether or not campus sexual assault was an epidemic on college campuses. She seemed to believe it was. There were various surveys, which I'm sure you're aware of, that have come out over the last 10, 15 years, which purport to demonstrate that there is an epidemic of sexual assault on college campuses. She accepted them really unquestioningly, and to me, the methodologies behind most of those studies are highly problematic, whether we're talking about the definitions of the crime, whether we're talking about the response rate, the sample size.
Yep.
But various problems.
Yeah.
And so she also talked about how there were students who came forward and made false accusations and were found to have made false accusations, but they were never punished, even when the accusations wreaked considerable harm upon both students and faculty who had been wrongly accused. There was one student who falsely accused her professor of sexual assault simply because she got a D in the class. And there was one point where I was asking her, this was a bigger issue on my radar at the time, the preponderance of evidence standard, the low standard of evidence that administrators are now charged by the Department of Education with using in adjudicating sexual assault investigations on campus. I looked her right in the eye, this Title IX coordinator, and I said, aside from rules and regulations, apart from whatever the sheets of paper say that you have to do, do you believe this standard of evidence is justified? And after about a 20-second silence, she looked at me and said, I can't answer that. And that's particularly telling to me when an administrator can't even answer that kind of question.
Right. Okay. So more broadly, you started to kind of focus in and started to, because this is obviously bigger than that campus, and it's
Right.
What did you start to see, and what kind of troubled you?
Well, I mean, I saw the Dear Colleague letter that came out of the Department of Education. I saw that there were no, this is coming from, a federal, body that at least dictates, that department dictates, whether it has authority or not, dictates that it's binding upon, 6,000 plus, colleges and universities. So it's definitely not something on the margins of society. It's very much centralized in society. And even before that, the Dear Colleague letter in April of 2011, there were many universities that used a preponderance of evidence standard. I also interviewed the assistant dean of students who said as much to me. And many other universities have also had very problematic procedures around adjudicating sexual assault. I maintain a list of several of them on my website. So so that's more of what I saw. So it's more of, I then went back to the university campus, to A&M after I no longer taught there, and I started talking to students there, just trying to raise awareness of the issues. Really, that was more of me trying to get my feet wet in activism, on the ground activism, just kind of out in the street. But there were many students. I was surprised by how receptive a lot of the students were. I managed to get an interview with the student newspaper, and they ran a story critical of the administration. Several students said that they, or actually there was one student in particular who said that they had been, wrongly accused at some kind of, it wasn't something directly on campus, but it was at an event affiliated with the university. And so, from that, I just kind of, that was all very informative. It helped me, it gave me experience in activism in this issue. But a lot of my work after that has been kind of on the research and networking front.
So just kind of going big picture here, when you've now become the kind of clearinghouse for all this information of these cases, what are you seeing out there in terms of trends and patterns, pace? What can you tell us?
Well, I can definitely tell you that the rate of filings of lawsuits is increasing. It's back in 2011 when the Department of Education's Dear Colleague letter came out. For a year and a half after that, people were still kind of coming to terms with what happened. There wasn't a lot of awareness because the Dear Colleague letter itself was issued without a period of public comment or review, which is what the Department of Education guidelines have to go under. So because of that, because of that and other factors, there was kind of a lot of people were late to the game, basically, and a lot of students just didn't know. They didn't see all the machinery behind what had happened to them. But it began to happen over time that students began consulting with attorneys and filing lawsuits, and even over time those lawsuits have kind of these attorneys have kind of learned from each other. As I've begun to include those lawsuits in my database, several attorneys have said, thank you so much for compiling this database because it's helped me build my first case against this university. So we're starting to see an increasing synergy that is increasingly snowballing over time. I don't think we are at critical mass just yet, but I think that over the next 2 years we'll be getting there. As far as beginning to actually, most of the lawsuits have been resulting in either a dismissal or a settlement, and so what we really need are cases to go all the way through to trial, so that we can start to get some good precedents and hopefully start to work our way more and more up through the higher courts, so that those precedents can be even stronger. So that's what we're needing. Historically, we haven't had a lot of success filing Title IX complaints per se for various reasons, but recently we had a pretty good win, Title IX win. I forget which university offhand. I could consult the database, but and there was a good win at a university regarding affirmative consent. We've had there's been some pretty good success, here and there when it comes to issuing stays of of expulsions by by university administrations, because students will want to, just let the case, resolve itself in a court of law, and hopefully get on with their academic career, and so they'll request that the judge issue, basically a stay of the administrative sanction or whatnot. So there's been some success here and there in that regard, but overall, I think, and this is a little bit of a speculation, a little bit of an educated guess, I think it'll take another 3 years probably before we start to see some significant change on the horizon, some very strong precedents start to be set.
I see. Okay, so you say most of them are either settling quietly, or so they hope, or being dismissed, meaning the case is not failing, is not advancing.
That's correct.
Yeah. But there's some willingness on the part of judges to at least say, okay, don't expel them while we work this out, however it ends up.
Yeah, and there have been, a few wins that have gone, all the way through to, to the end of the trial, basically, or to the end of the big ones. And I wouldn't even say that there's been any huge successes. I think that those are still on the horizon. So I think that, that's still more. These are moderate successes with which to build upon, future bigger successes.
Mhm. 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 And is that kind of frustrating to you that it hasn't kind of um,
Nope.
started to gel more quickly, or would you? Yeah.
No, I mean, so on the one hand, the fact is that I think that a lot of students are faced with some pretty horrible situations, and it's a serious injustice. And I think that, and we need to resolve it as soon as possible. On the other hand, I understand that change is not immediate, and it takes a process. It takes some time. Even if injustice should be corrected, immediately, without
Mhm.
delay, we have to go through the
Mhm.
process.
Mhm.
And my perspective has always been that we're at least 20 to 30 years behind the times, perhaps a bit longer, further behind in advocating for men and boys in academia. So I thought that we would take even longer to get these things going. Back in 2009, when I was a university instructor, there were no resources such as what I have compiled and presented to the world, and we have made considerable progress in basically networking and synergizing and bringing people together for a common cause. And I think that at the end of the day, at the end of the day, a lot of the work is in the advocacy community and creating change. A lot of that is done by forming relationships, and that's not something you really see in a database or in a court of law. Really forming the key relationships that will create the momentum and get things going. That is
Mhm.
something that has been increasingly solidified on the back end, and something which we'll start to see the effects of over the next several years. So
Mhm.
in that regard, I'm actually pleased with the progress. I thought that a few
Mhm.
years back I thought we would be I thought it would take us longer to see the progress that we already have been making.
Mhm. 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 Um, so two things. One is I want to go back to this measure. That I love a way to measure, and I know that these cases, God, take a long time to work their way through the system. God knows. So there's just and given how many settle, there's not a lot of actual cases to point to as look at these decisions that constitutes a trend. But on the filing end, in terms of what's going into the pipeline, you started by saying you're seeing a big change there. Can you just describe that?
Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, so, and I hope to, in the future, one of the things that I want to do is expand the database to include reports where it has, pie charts and
Uh-huh.
bar graphs which say, this is how many cases were filed in 2014, 2015. I couldn't give you a number off the top of my head how many were filed in 2014, 2015. I mean, I can go into the database and spend a few minutes, tabulating it all out. But I mean, if you're asking about, I mean,
Just tell me what you're picking up on in terms of a trend of filings.
yeah, so most of the filings have occurred within the last year and a half, and it has just really spiked in 2014, and there was a big spike in 2014, and in 20 that has continued into 2015. So I'm not quite sure what we'll see on the horizon.
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
not, I don't want to say that this definitely will happen or this or that
Yeah, yeah,
definitely
yeah,
will
yeah.
happen.
No one. But in terms of big spike, anything? Is it double what it was in 11
More. I'd say, if I could give a rough number offhand. I mean, what we saw in 2014 was probably triple what we saw in 2012. Triple or probably significantly more than that even.
Mhm.
I want to run the numbers again because I was just giving something kind of off the cuff.
Yeah. Okay. Um, okay. So yeah, that would be great if you could like kind of just give me a sense of what the bump up was in 14, 15, if it immediately went up 4 times from year over year or something, so we can characterize that. That would be really
So you want
helpful.
me to send that to you, or just
Yeah,
say that?
sure, that'd be
Okay.
fine. And then you said something earlier about that, about kind of this whole tension and the zero sum game.
Hmm.
And I wonder if I could draw you out a little bit more on that. As we're obviously sexual assault is a big problem, and obviously nobody wants to look at it. But is there something in the way we're looking at it, and maybe you just nailed it,
Hmm.
um, that's keeping us from kind of going at this in the right way or better
Yeah,
way?
I think the zero sum approach is definitely something that encapsulates. I think that's the mindset of a lot of people who advocate in behalf of sexual assault victims. For people will. I mean, they almost kind of remind me of extremist, gun rights advocates who oppose any kind of measures at all, no matter how reasonable, for reasonable restrictions. Uh, I mean, sexual assault victims advocates are very much like that in that they tend to oppose any kind of, even the mere mention that some men are wrongly accused. Like the very mention of it should be just wiped out of public memory or something like that, and that's something that, because they don't want it to be any kind of impediment at all to either securing in what in their mind is justice, which far too often they tend to characterize justice as every accusation resulting in a conviction, or someone's life being ruined. Uh, that's and sometimes on the other side we have people who won't give anyone any kind of anyone who comes forward with an accusation any kind of credibility. I think that there are still some cases where even the slightest errata in an accuser's story some people will use that to attempt to discredit their entire case. And sometimes we just have to maintain an evidence-based approach
Mhm.
and look at there's kind of this perspective to go along with this zero-sum approach that we're talking about. We see the symptoms of it when people say everyone has every victim has the right to be believed, every accuser has the right to be believed, and my perspective is that's not the case. Every accuser has the right to be considered. And we will find out who is the victim by considering
Mhm.
all sides.
Mhm.
And sometimes we don't find out who the
Mhm.
real victim is, and
Mhm.
that's very unfortunate.
Mhm.
But that's one of the consequences of living in a free society. Some people are free to commit crimes, but by living in a free society, we also are free from being railroaded into a criminal justice into a jail over trumped up accusations or accusations with no evidence behind them.
Mhm. 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 Well, there's also kind of, one of our bedrock kind of principles is better
Right.
that 10 guilty guys go free than one innocent. Um,
And that's excruciating for a lot of people to come to terms with, but it's something that we have to understand. And there has been a huge misinterpretation of the statistics. Some people will say, oh well, the rates of false accusations are so low as to not warrant any attention. Therefore, the whole, you know, what's called the Blackstone formulation, which some of them call it, you know, better that 10 go free than one guilty be found, wrongly found, wrongly imprisoned. There's a lot of people have tossed around some statistics to try and circumnavigate that, and and that's just that tends to be a very pervasive part of the discussion. The statistics are really just numerical manifestations of the attitudes that a lot of people have, and that's why the bad statistics don't go away, is because those attitudes remain.
mhm. Mhm. No, it was shocking to me. I don't know if you heard the congressional testimony the other day where I forget who it was that said, um, I won't quote him right. He basically said we should, maybe it's better that we kind of put everybody accused away. I mean, it
Oh,
was,
yeah, Jared
too,
Polis,
yeah.
Congressman Jared Polis.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was whether that was a a faux, not a faux pas. I wouldn't say it's a faux
Misspeak.
pas. Yeah, whether that's just a misspeak or whether that is what he really believes. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, that was disconcerting as well, definitely.
Yeah. But there is this kind of winner takes all or zero sum kind of perspective. I think you put it well. Reasonable minds are not always at work here.
Yeah, and
It is.
this is an issue that really evokes a lot of visceral feelings. So it's
Mhm.
hard for a lot of people to really. I mean, we historically, contrary to what we're often told, historically we have taken some strong stances against, sexual assault. I mean,
Mhm.
we used to hang people for sexual
Mhm.
assault, vigilante justice. We used to have laws in this country where
Mhm.
we executed people for
Mhm.
sexual assault. So it's not as though, I mean,
Mhm.
at the, when I was a boy, oh, not boy, when I was 17,
Mhm.
and I had my, I had my first girlfriend when I was 17, and I went to go meet her at her house and meet her parents. I mean, her father took me to his gun cabinet and showed me, all of the guns that he had, and made some overtures which demonstrated that if there was anything inappropriate that of a sexual nature that I did, that his guns would definitely be available for him to use. And there are a lot of boys who are young men who experience that type of that type of thing. So to say that we, in our culture have not historically taken, a strong stance against women who are victims of sexual, assault, that's not true. I mean, men have been killed over sexual impropriety. That doesn't even come to close to the classification of sexual assault. So,
Mhm.
I think that, we just need to, come back down to earth and
Mhm.
get back to reality of what is actually happening, rather than just listening to the ideological, dictates of someone someone in an ivory tower somewhere.
Mhm. 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 And you don't uh you are a sound like a pretty reasonable guy playing
Well, thank you.
pretty
Well,
straight down the middle. Are
well,
you
I'm sorry. Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I was just going to say typically kind of where your politics are at and where
Well,
you
I'm a
come.
centrist.
Yeah.
I'm the one who tends to annoy people on both sides of the political aisle,
Yeah.
and and one of the strengths of my platform is a data-driven approach.
Mhm.
So we have 13 databases that I'm currently building, and
Mhm.
so really I work with data, every
Mhm.
day,
Mhm.
and I have to keep, I I try to keep a balance of maintaining a very systematic, perspective on
Mhm.
analyzing trends and data and things like that. But at the same time, I'm also a social person. You can probably hear that as well. It's not
Mhm.
hard for me to talk to people.
Mhm.
I like empathizing with people as well. So
Mhm.
I hope to strike a balance in what I do, and really, balance at the end of the day is, what
Mhm.
this is all
Mhm.
about. So.
Mhm. Have you had interest from anyone in Congress or lawmakers about trying to get more on your numbers, or
Not
me? Not
directly.
yet.
What
Mhm.
usually happens is that people from other advocacy groups
I see.
will actually run a proposal by me and
Yeah.
ask me to look for opportunities for improvement.
Got
I've
it.
had that happen where people run
Yeah.
actual memos to Congress,
Mhm.
through my inbox, and some of them will ask me to. I've had someone actually ask me to write half of it, or to
Mm.
rewrite it, and things like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
So in that sense,
Got it. And
I'm. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, and are you still teaching?
I am not. I am not.
Okay.
It would be difficult for me to to maintain a teaching position. I think, depending upon the university, some are more
Yeah.
lax than others, given the political given the political, ties and with a lot of the things that I've been doing. So.
Are there other things that?
Well, no, I mean just for one thing, when I interviewed that Title IX coordinator 3 years ago, I basically took what she said and took a recording of it and blasted it to the world. Anyone who Googles me can find that. And if there's one thing that, remember at the end of the day, a lot of administrators are, careerists. They put themselves as an administrative class. They put themselves and their careers above everything. They cover each other. They block and tackle for each other all day long. And if one of the things that people hate is someone who comes anywhere close to being a whistleblower. And I don't know if you would classify me as a whistleblower, but there were some strong, there's some strong characteristics out of what I did that come close to that.
Okay. So you're doing this full time, or is there something else?
I have another job. I'd prefer not to disclose it, but increasingly this is becoming more and more of my job. I work on it every day, every night and every weekend. I probably put about 20 hours in a week to what I'm doing. And so in a sense it is a part-time job at least, although I don't get paid for it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, this is really, really helpful. And I would love it if you were able to kind of hone those numbers a little bit just so we know that that is indeed correct. And as far as you know, there's nobody else doing this out there?
No, there's no one else. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Well, I was surprised when I stumbled on it, so that was I was glad to. All right, let me talk you through how to, unless there's anything else I didn't ask you that you want to add in there.
Nope.
No? Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And if I don't see it in a few minutes, I will ring you back, but hopefully we're all square.
Well, all right. Great. Yeah, thank you so much for making some time for me this morning. Glad we could get it done. And
Yeah.
anything else?
Thank you. No, that's great, and I'll just wait to hear from you if you want to send me those, 13, 14, 15, or 12, 13. I think 12 you said was 0, so 12, 13, 14, 15 kind of.
Yeah, and some of them we don't have dates for.
The filing dates. Yeah. I hear you. Okay. Well, it's at least a rough picture.
Yeah. That's all it's intended to be. I don't claim that this represents all of the cases out there.
Right. Okay. Cool. Thank you so much again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, and feel free to be in touch as things pop up. Flag it for us. Let us know. I'd love the early warning that you get.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much. Take care. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.